Hello and welcome back. I'm Britt Hume, and this is On the Record. A new Fox News poll out tonight shows the presidential race tightening and the Clinton lead in the national polling average holds steady meanwhile. As of now, Mrs. Clinton leads in the Real Clear Politics average by 5.6 points in a four-way race and 5.4 points in a two-way. The betting odds, meanwhile, show Mrs. Clinton the favorite by nearly 5-1, although that's down a little bit. But in our new poll, just out, Mrs. Clinton's lead has shrunk to 3 points in a four-way race and 5 points in a two-way. Both numbers are noticeably down from, as you can see, from our poll last week. For more on the Fox poll, we turn to one of the people who did the work. Darren Shaw of Shaw Research is also a member of the Fox News decision team. Hello, Darren. How are you?
I'm doing well, Britt. Good to see you.
Thanks for taking the time. Tell me a little bit about this. Obviously, the Real Clear Politics average, her lead, Mrs. Clinton's lead, hovers around 6 points. We've got it tonight at 3. Should we treat that as the kind of fluctuations you normally see in polling, or as something potentially significant?
Well, I think the nice thing is that we've been polling almost every week now since the end of September. And so the comparisons that you raised up front are the ones I think that are appropriate, right? She had a 6-point lead 2.5 weeks ago. She had a 5-point lead last week, and now it's at 3 points. And you notice her numbers are pretty much steady state, 44, 44, 45. His numbers have gone from 38 to 39 to 41, so he has ticked up a little bit, right? And I think that's probably the best barometer. Hold the methodology constant, look at movement within a single poll, and so it's a little tick upwards for him.
Right. Now tell me, so you would you think that this signifies that the polling averages are off? That we're looking at a trend here that those polls haven't yet picked up, or what?
It's weird. I was looking at all the polls that came out today, Britt. I think there were 9 or 10 of them, and they showed the race between +13 Clinton to +1 Trump. So I can just imagine what the average viewer is thinking, looking at this kind of a mess. I do think you're going to see a convergence, though, in the polls. I think the ones that have been best for Trump are beginning to show a very small Clinton lead. And I think the ones that have been best for Clinton are coming back down to, the Real Clear average or what the Fox poll is showing. I think the average is probably the way to go here. I think the race is between 3 to 5 points. I do think that we're probably an early indicator here. I think that you're seeing a little bit of narrowing in the race as Republicans begin to come home. There were more Republicans to come home, so in some sense it's natural. The question is whether there's enough and whether he can get enough juice out of independents to actually get to where he needs to be.
Now, speaking of independents, that number right now in our new poll looks much better for Donald Trump than it did before. Let's see if we can get that up on the screen, because his lead among independents had dwindled, and now you see that he's, well, let's see, among the likely voters, he's leading by 13, and I believe that lead was down in our last poll down to around 7, wasn't it?
That's right. I think 2.5 weeks ago we had him tied amongst independents. And, look, Republicans don't win national races when they're tied with independents. Democrats are still the plurality party. Republicans have to, lock down their vote and then have a decent edge amongst independents. He was nowhere near that 2.5 weeks ago. They're drifting back a little bit, right? He's now kind of on the cusp of being competitive nationally. And you're right, it's because Republicans are beginning to move back and that independent number has ticked up again. And that's something she's going to have to be very careful about.
Yes, speaking of that, Republicans coming back, I believe we had Trump down at about 80% and Clinton up at about 87 a week or 10 days ago. And in this poll, among Republicans, they're about the same. I think she's at 83% of Democrats and he's at 81% of Republicans. That's a different picture. And it looks like she's declined well, 4 percentage points. I guess that's within the margin of error, but that's noticeable.
It is. It is. I think the net numbers, the net advantage each of them enjoys within their own partisans is about +75 for both of them. So her edge amongst Democrats has dissipated over the last week and a half. This could be a little bit of polling noise, or it could be, she hasn't had a good week in the news. The WikiLeaks, the Obamacare numbers that have come out. So there's a little bit of a problem she's had, and as she's drawn more, this is something we've seen throughout the race. Whichever candidate draws a lion's share of attention seems to take a hit in the polls. And maybe that's what we're seeing over the last 4 or 5 days.
I guess that's natural in a year when people say they don't think much of both candidates. One more thing, Darren, I have to ask you this because I hear it all the time from people, and that is they look at the party identification of those people polled, and they see Democrats plus some number. And I think in this particular poll right now, it's Democrats +7, and they say, look, if you're polling Democrats +7, you're going to get a Democrat in the lead in every time. This is not honest polling. Why isn't it more balanced? Explain it if you can.
Sure. The Democratic advantage in party ID has been around since the New Deal. Back in the Roosevelt days, the Democrats were absolutely dominant. Since the Reagan years, the Democrats' lead has shrunk significantly, but they're still the plurality party. And the question in a given election is, are they +1 or near even, or are they +6, 7, or 8 points? And that reflects politics. And I think what people need to understand is that party identification is an attitude, and it is responsive to what's going on out there in the news. So the movement that you see from poll to poll is usually very weakly attached partisans, Britt, who respond to a bad week for Trump or a bad week for Clinton by saying, well, I'm independent, right? And so they move out of the partisan pool into the independent pool. Not a lot, but just a couple points or so, and that accounts for much of the fluctuation that you see, in the Fox poll, for instance, as well as any of the other major media polls.
Yeah, now we're going to look at the independent number there, but we talked about that earlier. But I was just going to note that my experience has been also that in these polls, when you find a candidate of a particular party doing well, people who support that candidate tend to associate themselves with that party because party affiliations are not ironclad in America.
That's right. As far as individual attitudes go, they're pretty stable. But you do have a lot of people who are sort of weakly attached to one party or the other. They respond to candidates, they respond to politics, right? And so, most pollsters, Fox News included, treat, partisanship, party identification as an attitude. And as an attitude, it's responsive to the politics of the day. So good day for the Democrats, they tend to do a little better. Not 10 points better, but a couple of points. And I think you see that in a lot of the major media polls.
Got it. Darren, thanks very much.